to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Thursday, February 26, 2015. Sure, happy it's Thursday. Sure, happy it's Thursday. Sure, happy it's Thursday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open. 877-300-7645. 877-300-7645. Don is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Now, as you've probably already heard, it's been on the news, the FCC has approved what is being promoted as the net neutrality rules. Broadband internet access is now classified as a utility. Now, what the ramifications are, we still don't know, because the 300-plus page proposal was unveiled just minutes before the vote took place, and people are still trying to dig in there and find out what's really going on, because the idea of net neutrality can be described in a couple of pages. So there's a lot of stuff in there. We're still waiting to see what it's going to be. It's probably going to involve taxes, fees, and regulatory compliance and all this other kind of nonsense, and probably open the door to internet censorship, which we've kind of known was coming, but we're going to see it. Interestingly enough, there's still a lot of propaganda going back and forth. Obviously, the big telecom companies, the big ISPs were opposed to net neutrality because they were planning on prioritizing service and charging for that. And that, of course, was something that was going to work against small, independent voices, such as yours truly here. It's what came in with it that we need to be very, very concerned about. So I'm looking at an article over at Oraz.com saying, no, the FCC won't take away your TV shows. Apparently, the lobbyists on both sides have been just pouring money into the attacks and all kinds of stuff. At one point, there was a report in a newspaper that the government could choose to defund TV shows that they did not approve of. Well, the government gets rid of TV shows they don't like, but they're a lot more subtle about that. But apparently, and this is coming out of Judge Napolitano, the Congress, should it desire to, could void all or part of this net neutrality agreement. So it looks like there may still be a fight over that. But again, we need to find out what's actually in there, and it's always going to be about taking more money away from the public and limiting what the public gets in return, which is the American style of government here. Now, there is an amazing amount of spinal fortitude on display by our Secretary of State, John Kerry, and by the White House, who's obviously backing him in this, basically has come out and point blank said, Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu has been lying about Iran nuclear weapons, which we've known all along. Israel's been screaming that Iran is within months of a nuclear weapon all the way back to the 1980s. And no evidence has surfaced to support that. A lot of fake evidence. The laptop of death, which was propaganda laundered through MEK, which is now out there saying, oh, well, Iran's got a completely separate nuclear program that Mossad and CIA and NSA, they were completely oblivious to it. But trust us, it's really there. Raising on a busted flush here. But with the leakage of those Mossad documents that show that at the same time Netanyahu was up at the United Nations with his cute little cartoon bomb, that his own top intelligence service was saying, we're not seeing that Iran is doing anything that is consistent with developing a nuclear weapon. They're building a nuclear power station, which they're allowed to do under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They're seeking industrial uses of nuclear technology, destaticers, medical isotopes, various things like that. But they're not making a bomb. And John Kerry is now up at Congress talking about Netanyahu's upcoming speech, screaming that Iran has a Death Star, Iran has a Death Star. And Kerry is reminding members of Congress correctly how hard Netanyahu was pushing the United States to get into the war with Iraq, the second invasion. And how a lot of this information that claimed to prove that Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons came from Israel. And so Kerry's up there telling Congress, you can't trust what this guy says. He is a known, proven liar. And he is. And I'm going to have to take back some of the bad things I've been saying about Obama and Kerry, because they're finally taking a stand on this issue. And it's probably because Obama is realizing with less than 2 years left in office, he's thinking about his historical legacy. And it's one thing to start a war that he can end and declare victory, and I'm the triumphant wartime president. It's quite another to start a war that is still going to be going on when he leaves office, and all future presidents are going to blame him for having started the mess. So Obama definitely wants out of this. Now, over in the Ukraine, which is still potentially a major flashpoint for the escalation of World War III, Donbass is leveling accusations at Kyiv over their economic blockade. And apparently Donetsk and Lugansk are introducing a new idea, a multi-currency financial system. And it's basically using the U.S. dollar, the euro, and the yuan. All will be accepted legal tender. And this is to shield against the fall of the domestic currency, which is in serious trouble. And that's actually not a bad idea to run a national economy where you have multiple currencies accepted. Because that way the owner of the single currency can't play nasty games with you, as we see under the euro and the dollar-dominated nations here. Now, Gazprom is apparently making preparations to sever the natural gas feed going to Ukraine, Kiev, and because of the humanitarian disaster in the eastern Ukrainian republics, Gazprom is looking at a way to go on providing natural gas supplies to Donbass without allowing Kiev to dip into it, as Kiev has been dipping into the gas supplies going to Europe. Because technically, Gazprom is not providing gas to Kiev because they haven't paid their bill. And they've missed their prepayment for new gas. So they're getting ready to go on supplying the eastern Ukrainian republics while cutting off Kiev, and they're looking at ways of being able to guarantee Europe's supply of natural gas without Poroshenko sucking off of that pipeline. So they're moving forward with that. Interesting little story over at Journal Neo. Ukraine electricity emergency courtesy of guess who? They're running out of resources over in Kiev. They're now starting to have rolling blackouts over there because they can't keep the generating stations running 24 hours a day any longer because they're running out of energy over there. And not too surprisingly, the anti-government protest in Kiev continues to escalate. It's broken into outright clashes between the police and the National Guard and the people of Ukraine. There have been incidents of Molotov cocktails and attempts to shut down the airport. And these are the same people who got suckered into getting rid of Yanukovych because, Poroshenko's going to be better. He makes chocolate. He's harmless. And they've had a year of this U.S. puppet rule, and they've really had enough of it. So Poroshenko is dealing with adversity right on his own doorstep here. Now, it is being confirmed, finally, that Ukraine has started withdrawing heavy weapons from the eastern Ukrainian republics, the front lines there. Now, we've had conflicting reports that there are still a major tank engagement going on near Debaltsevo. But it's been confirmed that the Kiev forces are bringing back the heavy artillery, specifically the 100-millimeter howitzers. The eastern Ukrainian republics are pulling their heavy weapons back. And so it looks like Putin, Merkel, and Holland have, at least for the moment, pulled the rug out from under the U.S. plan to try and start a war with Russia in Ukraine. That's 2 for 2 for Putin between Syria and Ukraine. And 0 for 2 for Obama. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We got a couple of callers on the line. I'm going to get to you in just a minute. But I wanted to sort of finish up on something that we mentioned yesterday. Apparently, Ukraine's President Poroshenko took a big chunk of those billions the IMF just loaned him to try and repair the economic damage in Ukraine, and instead he went on down to the United Arab Emirates, where they were having a big weapons show, and he just went spending, and it's reported that he has signed roughly 20 contracts on the supply of new modern weaponry to Ukraine. We know that that stuff is not cheap. And that's what he's spending all this money on, which the Ukrainian people are supposed to pay back with accruing interest somewhere down the road. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today? Dustin, are you there?
Hello?
You're there. You're on the air. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Yeah, it's a shame he can spend money on the weapons, but he can't get any resources to keep the electricity on.
Yes.
Yeah, these are the kind of people that we put in, you know.
Yeah, inevitably. If you look at the entire history of U.S. Covert overthrow of other countries since the end of World War II, we put in these tyrants who will crush down their people in order to maximize American corporate profits. That's what Batista did in Cuba, even obviously before most of us were born. But what Batista did was he kept the Cuban people down, and he sold Cuba's agricultural produce for way below the prevailing global market rate, which allowed companies like United Fruit and PepsiCo to become insanely rich. And they turned around and very generously supported politicians who continued the Cuba policy, like Richard Nixon. And that's always been the pattern. The U.S. is always telling us that, oh, we're bringing democracy to those people. No, hasn't happened even once. It's always a dictatorship with false trappings of democracy, rigged elections, suppression of free speech, and so forth.
Like the beginning of the new RoboCop movie when they're bringing it to Tehran.
I'm sorry, the beginning of which movie?
RoboCop, when they brought it to Tehran, Operation Tehran.
I thought I took a look at the new RoboCop movie, but I don't remember that part of it. I wasn't impressed with the new one. I mean, the visual effects certainly were a grade above the original one, but I thought they were trying to make it too topical and too politicized, and it sort of undercut the interest in the film.
Hey, Mike, with the weapons, the time they get to Ukraine, how many people are going to be left to fight with them?
Well, that's what the trainers are for, and Great Britain is sending trainers, and Poland is sending trainers, and we already know there are Americans on the ground there. In fact, Vladimir Putin did an interview, we have it linked to whatreallyhappened.com, where he's saying basically all of these so-called volunteer brigades fighting for Kiev, they're actually foreign legions on behalf of NATO. We've got all these videos of British accented English speakers and American accented English speakers, and that's what they're there for. And by the way, there is a serious case to be made for all of these foreign trainers to be a violation of the Minsk Accord. But, of course, for the United States and Great Britain, a treaty is not going to get in the way of doing what they want to do.
Well, all I got to say is NATO, Washington, London, Tel Aviv, Crimea River.
Yeah. Well, Poroshenko's out there saying, I'm going to regain control of Crimea. Okay, here's your rifle, here's your parachute. Here's your bright day-glow orange jumpsuit. Have fun. Anything else?
Oh yeah, and I still think this ain't over yet. It's going to be a two-pronged strategy with Syria. I think they could use ISIS to go in there, and then if the Russians get involved, they could turn around and say the Russians are helping ISIS.
They could. I mean, they're grasping at straws right now in terms of trying to create some kind of a myth that the American people are going to buy, but at this point, all the corporate media reassurances that America still loves their government and lusts for war, I'm not seeing it get any traction among the people that I talk to.
Yeah, Putin's everywhere, huh? Siberian Express is there, he's here, he's everywhere, huh?
Yes, Putin stole Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. Putin's going to steal the moon. So.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Jack in the United Kingdom. Aloha, Jack. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I'd just like to say thanks a lot for everything you do. I've been listening for just over a year now, and I find everything that you say very informative.
Thank you.
No problem. I'd just like to speak about the Federal Reserve. I just think it's an absolute disgrace how few people actually know how the money system works, how the financial system works.
Well, that's intentionally hidden from ordinary people. And I think a good illustration of that, of course, is the fact that in 1913, when the Federal Reserve was inflicted on us all, the public schools stopped teaching about the real causes of the American Revolution, which was King George III's Currency Act, because our corrupted Congress and corrupted president had sold us back into the slavery of the same banking system we fought a revolution to be free of. But they don't want you to know about it. And I remember when I was going to school, seeing all these little film strips out there about how the Federal Reserve was wonderful, and this is the way all economies ought to be run, and you should never, ever doubt that these private central bankers really want the best for the nation and its people.
Yeah, and it's really coming back to bite everybody now.
Well, the people are waking up to what's been going on, and certainly the developments with the Comer lawsuit in Canada, where the government is just trying to keep this hidden from the people because they have no explanation for why they were borrowing money at interest from private banks when under the law they get interest-free loans from the Bank of Canada. And the Canadian people are getting very angry about that because so far the only answer the Canadian government has is, well, we decided to loot all you taxpayers and give it to the private bankers because the private bankers write really generous campaign donations every election, which is actually the story behind much of politics not only in Canada but in the United States of America. And this is not sitting well with the Canadians. It doesn't sit well here with the United States of America.
No, it certainly doesn't sit well with me either.
Well, in Great Britain, of course, following the end of World War II and Bretton Woods, Great Britain did nationalize the Bank of England. So they're a little bit more in tow. I think one of the major sticking points about Great Britain fully merging with the European Union and adopting the euro is they'd have to go back to allowing a privately owned central bank to issue all of the currency as a loan at interest. And because of the past perception of the Bank of England and the fact that it did trigger a revolution, the British people are still kind of saying, we don't want to take that final step.
Yeah. It's just, it's an absolute disgrace how things could have got to this point, you know what I mean? And as I say, how few people know, and when you tell them this, they have such a perplexed look on their face, like, how can this be happening, you know what I mean?
Again, the intention of the bankers and the government was that the people never really understand how this is really working. They don't want you to see your slave chains. Too late. Thank you for the call, Jack. We got to let you go now, and we got to take a break for some commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I just posted an article at whatreallyhappened.com. The Ukrainian national currency has hit a new low of 30 hryvnia to a single U.S. dollar. And that's why the Eastern Ukrainian republics are now adopting a multi-currency financial system to get away from that. Alrighty, getting on back to other news here. Story out of SputnikNews.com. Former NATO intel officer blames the U.S. for the Ukraine crisis. Wonderful grasp of the obvious, but he's going back earlier than a year ago and the U.S.-backed coup d'etat against Yanukovych. He says this goes back over 30 years of the United States deliberately trying to sabotage relations between Europe and Russia, trying to get that Cold War back. And now we're in a situation where European countries are starting to say, Russia, United States, Russia, United States. We're going to have to think about that one for a while. Certainly, Ukraine's former government underscored that by saying, we're going to go with Russia. This European Union deal is raw. Look what it's doing to all those European countries who got suckered into it. Now you've got Crimea left, went over, merged with Russia of their own free will following an election. And now Cyprus has signed a military agreement with Russia, allowing Russia to use their Cyprus ports for their naval vessels. So it looks like that whole policy is coming apart. Now then, you are probably all familiar with the uber villain of all time, at least ever since the phony Osama bin Laden got killed in Abbottabad. Jihadi John. That's the name that's been given to the gentleman dressed in black that is the star of all of these beheading videos that Site Intelligence keeps putting on out there. And he speaks with a British accent. And people are wondering, who the heck is this guy? And apparently they have now tracked down who he is. all over the news. And apparently the guy's name is Mzawi. And even more embarrassing, this is out of INFOWARS. The Daily Mail is reporting that Mzawi is close buddies with MI5. So, and he's saying, they know where I am. We talk all the time. And, you know, I'm not actually working for them, but, you know, we chat all the time. Blah, 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 blah. CNN, in an effort to counter this embarrassing revelation, on their story, Who is Jihad John, actually flashed a picture of Vladimir Putin. They're saying it was an accident. It was a blooper, really. We're not trying to convince people that Vladimir Putin is Jihadi John. No. We're CNN. We would never do anything like that. You know, Bill O'Reilly and Brian Williams, they work for those other networks, so forth and so on. Now, as you heard on the SRN News Break, there is a new video out showing ISIS trashing an Iraqi museum, going in and there's a wall full of statues and they're taking sledgehammers to it, and it's very, very horrible. Is it obvious now that all of these videos are public relations operations? They're doing things calculated to offend different segments of society. We're going to get the Christians all riled up against ISIS. Now we're going to get the historians and archaeologists and culture freaks riled up against ISIS. I'm waiting for them to come out with a video showing kittens being tortured. But did you notice on the SRN News Break, they mentioned that ISIS attacked and defaced a mosque? Doesn't that tell you that whoever ISIS really is, they are not Islamists? Now, the excuse given was that ISIS felt this particular mosque was heretical. I don't think so. I'm hardly alone in my suspicion that ISIS is the newly manufactured supervillain we're all supposed to hate. And they're doing all of these staged events, beheadings, burning the guy, smashing museums. They're trying to find something that will enrage us so much that we disconnect our brains. We stop thinking about what's really going on. We forget all about the legion of lies this government has fed us to start wars, and we'll just want to get ISIS any way we can. Here, take my money, take the lives of my children. We've got to get those evil ISIS wherever they may be. That's the propaganda message they're trying to push. Just get everybody rearing to go here. And it's going to get more absurd, desperate, and pathetic as time goes on here. Because, well, it already is pretty pathetic here. All right, now getting on to the net neutrality bill and the call for internet censorship, and it seems that we go through this every so often until finally stands up and says, at least here in the United States of America, we do have that First Amendment, which is an absolute. It is an absolute. You either have freedom of speech or you have speech that's authorized by the government. The two cannot overlap. Now, French President François Hollande, demonstrating to the French people who he really works for, is now out there declaring that online anti-Semitism has to be prosecuted to the same degree that child pornography is. And France is going to crack down on anti-Semitism, homophobia, Holocaust denial. Rather interesting, he doesn't mention Islamophobia in there. That didn't make his list of offensive things that are online here. But Hollande is out there saying the internet has to be regulated to suppress videos and search results that are anti-Semitic. And of course, anti-Semitic is a very loosey-goosey definition. It's not codified anywhere. And basically, certainly from Israel's point of view, anything that criticizes their government and its actions or calls into question their version of history, oh, that's anti-Semitism. You can't say that. You're just being anti-Semitic. And to show you how absurd this is, can you imagine anybody trying to defend the Nazis' behaviors by screaming, you're being anti-German? Hitler didn't do anything wrong, you just hate the German people, and that's why you're making all these complaints. Because in the end, when we comment on the actions of Israel's government, we're talking about the behaviors of this group of individuals. We're not questioning their religious belief. We're not attacking them for being the descendants of Central Asian Khazars. It is their behavior that is the issue. And it is not anti-Semitic to criticize the actions of Israel's government. It's not anti-American to criticize the actions of the American government. That's why the First Amendment is there. In a true democracy, the people have every right to stand up and tell the government when the government is doing wrong, especially in an age like this where governments all over the world are engaged in massive wrongs against their own people. But we're seeing the latest hue and cry that the Internet has to be controlled, it has to be shut down. We've got to stop all those websites that point out where the official story can't be true. I mean, we need the people to believe us. How will we have wars? How will we take their wealth? How will we take their children if people don't believe what we tell them to believe? Human-caused global warming, and so forth. And they're still out there trying to sell that one. We're talking about that a little bit later in the show here. Now, over in Israel, a member of their Knesset is now out there saying that the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement is anti-Semitism and ought to be prosecuted as such. No, it shouldn't. Boycotts are a recognized form of peaceful civil protest against governmental wrongdoing. Gandhi used them in India. We're using them right now. And again, the issue is not the Jewish people. It is the behavior, the actions of the government of Israel that is the issue. We'll be right back. Oh, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, a few days ago, there was a mosque that was targeted in Jerusalem in what they're saying was a hate crime. Today, it's a Greek Orthodox seminary. It was spray-painted with graffiti, Jesus is the son of a whore, and redemption of Zion. Somebody's trying to kick up rivalries, religious opposition, to split the people, same like they're doing in this country, trying to create racial divides. Now, turning on down to South America, we've been talking about how the U.S. is once again engaged in tinkering with governments of other people's countries where they really ought not to be. And we're looking at this story where Argentina has issued a press release declaring they will make a formal protest to the United Nations over a United States Air Force C-17 transport that was caught smuggling undeclared weapons and other materials into Argentina. And the material included communications intercept gear, encrypted radios, sophisticated GPS devices, high-power rifles, a machine gun, narcotics, and oddly enough, a full trunk of stimulants that were actually past their expiration date. The Argentine government is estimating the value of these materials and the C-17 transport expenses to exceed $2 million. So it looks like the U.S. is getting ready to go in and overthrow Argentina. We've got to bring democracy to those people. Another story out of Counterpunch talking about U.S. aggressions against Venezuela. Now, the Obama administration has finally gone on record saying, no, we're not intervening in Venezuela. Really, we're not doing that at all. But apparently, they have, in fact, uncovered a coup d'etat where the plotters were being paid in U.S. dollars. They've arrested the mayor of one of the major cities. So Jen Psaki is out there saying, oh, no, we don't do that stuff. And by the way, next time you see Jen Psaki on TV talking, turn down the volume and look at her. She looks stoned. They got her on heavy tranquilizers, which, if you're up there lying to the world, I guess you're going to need a little bit of help. But anybody who knows the history of U.S.-South American relations going back over the last 50 years knows the U.S. is always interfering in other people's countries. Always, always, always. I don't know what they're paying Jen Psaki, but it's nowhere near enough for what she's doing here. Story out of Russia today. Remember, the Royal Bank of Scotland had to get bailed out. Well, apparently their staff are getting gigantic bonuses despite having lost £3.5 billion in 2014. Isn't that weird how you can be a manager of a bank that loses a huge amount of money and still somehow you're going to get your big fat bonus? Whatever happened to incentivizing success and penalizing failure does not seem to apply to the money junkies, does it? Mess up, get a bonus. Do well, get a bigger bonus, maybe. Now, we've had an update from Canada regarding the Comer lawsuit. This was in front of a federal court of appeals. And the federal court of appeals rejected Canada's government's claim that the lawsuit has no merit, can't be brought. That lacks jurisdiction, I think, was the argument that was there. And the government will probably take that decision to the Supreme Court of Canada. But the Federal Court of Appeals sent back the appeal to Comer, needing some changes to deal with some technicalities about the law. But it's still going to move forward. They're making progress about this. Now, for those of you who are just finding out about Comer, and you may not know about it because the government of Canada is trying to block this story everywhere. Inside Canada, the government has ordered the media to not report on this at all. I am still getting emails from people who live in Canada who say that every time I post a link regarding the Comer lawsuit, it is blocked on Canada's internet. Now, the Bank of Canada is actually owned by the people of Canada. It's rather unique in this world of privately owned central banks. And under the original charter for the Bank of Canada, the Bank of Canada is supposed to provide interest-free loans to all levels of Canadian government for infrastructure development, things they need, schools, highways, better roads, better hospitals, and so forth. But starting in the 1970s, the Canadian government, the main Canadian government, started borrowing their money from privately owned banks at interest, forcing the Canadian taxpayers to pay those interest charges. Now, the Comer lawsuit seeks to force the Canadian government to go back to availing itself of the interest-free loans mandated by the Charter of the Bank of Canada. And so far, the courts have agreed Comer is correct. They are sound in logic and law. Now, the reason the government is banning this story and trying to suppress it and trying to distract from it, with all this new terrorist to pay no attention to how we've been ripping off the Canadian taxpayer, we've got terrorists, we've got terrorism, we've got to read your emails, and so forth. But the reason they're coming down hard on this is the same reason the U.S. government doesn't want you asking about why is our federal government borrowing money at interest from the Federal Reserve when the Constitution allows our government to create and issue its own interest-free money to buy what they need. And they don't have an answer for that, other than, and it's the same answer both in Canada and the United States of America. Well, we're going to loot the American people or Canadian people and give that money to the bankers because those bankers write really generous campaign donation checks every election cycle. That's the only possible explanation that's out there. There's no other reason for the Canadian and American governments to be plunging us into debt to private bankers when under the Charter of the Bank of Canada and under the United States Constitution, both governments have access to interest-free loans or interest-free money. And that's a big part of what they never wanted you to find out. Didn't want you to know that's what's going on in the dark hallways of Washington, D.C. and Wall Street, the bowels of power. Now, over in Europe, the HSBC chiefs are bowing their heads in shame and saying, we're sorry. We got caught. We were bad. We promise to be better in the future, which is what they say every time they get caught with these things. But the Independent is reporting it may be a little too late. Too little too late, in fact, because you've got the authorities in Belgium, France, and the United States preparing prosecutions for this tax avoidance system. And the days of the too big to jail bankers may be coming to an end. Iceland didn't hesitate throwing their bankers in prison. Iceland didn't hesitate writing off all that portion of the debt created through fraud. And Iceland's economy is doing great compared to 2008. Which is why you never hear about Iceland in the news much anymore. Meanwhile, actress Emma Thompson and her husband have declared they will not pay a single cent more in any taxes until the HSBC tax evaders go to prison. And that is a huge, huge list of politicians, celebrities, drug lords, terrorists. HSBC was not very discriminating in those that they allowed to take advantage of this little tax avoidance scheme. As long as you got money to hide, we'll help you hide it. Even the head of HSBC himself had about 5 million pounds hidden in there as well. We're talking about 100,000 people. And it's very embarrassing coming during our own current tax season because it's obvious that the 1%ers do not, in fact, pay their fair share of the taxes. They had an escape hatch, and they used it. Something like 100,000 names have now been caught up in this scandal. Alrighty, coming up on the news break, and by the way, McDonald's is now accused of a billion with a B euros tax evasion. They got caught up in all of this stuff. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open. 877-300-7645. 877-300-7645. Don is still in our control room, his hand hovering over that telephone, waiting for that little ringing sound to put you on the air. Getting on back to the economy here, looking at a story, U.S. bank locations. There's a very interesting list, and it's linked to whatreallyhappened.com under the headline, Banks Ranked by Derivatives. And it is simply a listing of all the banks in the United States of America sorted by their derivatives exposure, with J.P. Morgan Chase way up there at the top of the list with trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of derivatives exposure. And what is interesting is that it appears that pretty much every American bank is on that list. And I was rather chagrined to find some of our local Hawaiian banks are on the list, although their derivatives exposure are $1 billion and less. But it is a huge mess. And remember, Congress already changed the laws late last year so that derivatives losses are paid first in a bank crash, ahead of the depositors, ahead of the investors. In other words, in true fascist economic dictatorship, ordinary people who had nothing to say about the derivatives will be forced to pay the losses. And the bank executives, as we just saw in that story with the RBS, will get huge bonuses for being so very, very clever as to drop the losses on the ordinary people with the complicity of the government. U.S. weekly jobless claims rose to 313,000. It was expected they were going to go to only 288,000. So a little unexpected increase in unemployment. But of course the official unemployment number continues to stay way down in that low, just single percentage. You don't want to pay attention to that. And we all know it's a joke. We know it's a joke because the United States is a nation of roughly 300 million individuals, not all of whom are eligible to work. If you're under the age of 15 or you're past retirement, you come off that list. And I'm not including the potential illegals either. But out of that remaining number of Americans of working age and capability, we know there are over 90 million who cannot find work, willing and able to work. We're talking about a real jobless rate, unemployment rate, from the employable population of close to 40%. That's worse than it was during the Depression of the 1930s. This leads us to a very interesting article, actually over in Quora. They were posing the question, how could Germany, in a span of just 80 years, lose the First World War, get back into shape enough to fight another one in 20 years, lose that one, and then still be one of the wealthiest countries today? And the answer that was provided was simply that the Germans have some traits that tend to make them economically successful. They spend a lot of time and energy early on with all of their enterprises to get them well organized and efficient. concentrating on the long-term goals rather than just short-term, I want my money now. Many German companies are able to compete globally, even against American companies, even though Germany is a high-wage nation. And they're able to do that simply because they are efficient. Now, this gets us back down to an issue I've been talking about. At the end of World War II, where American industry was booming because we were the only nation that had not lost their industrial base to bombs, companies were growing so fast, they were trying to find managers, they couldn't promote people off the factory floors who knew how things were done. They were too valuable where they were. So Harvard Business School came out with the concept of scientific business management, a standardized set of procedures where any manager could run any company anywhere. And they came up with a degree program to go with that called the Masters in Business Administration, the MBA. And it worked really well. These young kids from wealthy families were getting MBAs and being hired right into the management level of all these new companies that were booming across America. But it created a problem because we grew up with a generation of managers who were isolated from the actual processes of their companies. They couldn't look at what was going on the factory floor, in the lab, on the assembly line, and tell if it was efficient or not. They were oblivious to it. And that's why American industry has lost efficiency, because we put this big black line between management and the actual process of making products. And now we're paying for it. I actually went through a little of this in Hollywood when Jurassic Park made it obvious that computer animation was the way to go. And everybody started getting computer animation companies, or computer animation departments, rather. And they'd bring them in and put them underneath managers who had no clue what the technology was doing. And a lot of those early efforts just crumbled because they couldn't promote the actual CGI people out of those chairs. They needed them there. They were the only ones who knew what was going on. And we had management structures who were clueless or who were so locked into the way things used to be done that they couldn't adapt. And there were a lot of major, major embarrassments there. You get efficient industry when the people who are managing those industries grow up in those industries. That's what Germany does. U.S. does not. We're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. Andrea in Oklahoma. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes. You were talking about all these banks and their theft. But what about WorldCom? Those poor farmers that had co-opted all their money from their crops and had pooled it all together, and it was just stolen out from under them. They took it to Congress, put it before Congress, and you're just out of luck.
Well, that's what the Congress is telling all Americans, not just the farmers. I mean, starting in the Clinton administration, the federal government started, you'll pardon the expression, borrowing the cash buildup in the Social Security Trust Fund that was there for the baby boomer retirements and replacing them with nice little treasury bonds. And they spent that Social Security cash like it was general revenues. That's where Clinton got his magic federal government budget surplus. And he was out there saying, it's the economy, stupid. See how good I did. I did really good. We had a budget surplus here. And he did it by basically embezzling the retirement money of the American workers. Well, here we are all these years later. The U.S. government cannot redeem all those treasury bonds they put in the Social Security Trust Fund. So what do we hear Congress saying? Well, we're going to have to cut benefits. We're going to have to raise the retirement age, and you're just going to be out of luck. And now we're hearing the same thing about all the pension funds that got defunded in the 2008 crash of the mortgage-backed security fraud, where they're saying, well, we're going to change the law so that all these pension plans can now start reducing the benefits they promised the people paying into the system. In the end, ordinary people always get the short end of the stick, courtesy of the United States government.
Well, the thing is, a bully, once they can get by with taking your lunch money, they're not going to stop. They're going to keep rolling on and seeing how much they can do until somebody hauls off and punches them in the nose. And I don't know, according to Hollywood, after you do that, then you become best friends, but I can't see that happening. And then there was TARP, you know. It seemed like they really cleaned up and they had the bonuses really going after they passed that. And it's just, it seems like it's just getting worse and worse and worse and worse.
Oh,
because nobody can punch them in the nose.
Well, you know, I'm not encouraging people to punch them in the nose, but I am encouraging people to start delinking from the system and stop being the fodder that feeds the machine. But at this point, the one percenters did great since 2008. The rest of us haven't. But looking past the wealth of the one percenters lies a huge debt monster. And they're just now realizing they can't pay that debt off by looting the American people because we are out of money out here. Got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, Andrea. We're going to be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we take this next phone call, it now appears the United States Senate is going to go ahead and vote through the funding bill for the Department of Homeland Security without the requirement that Obama's quite illegal amnesty be defunded and blocked. So Congress has caved into the president's quite unconstitutional actions on this. Frankly, if this Congress had any spine, they'd be starting impeachment proceedings against him. Then that would put Biden in the Oval Office, so maybe that's not such a good idea anyway. We're going to grab a phone call here. James in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, aloha, Mike. Well, I guess another day, another Republican capitulation. What I wanted to talk to you about, I looked at Drudge earlier today, and then I looked at them just a short while ago, and they posted a brand new lead story of how the VATF is going to redouble their efforts now to ban all AR-15 ammunition.
Okay, well, let me give you a clarification on that. Apparently, Obama has signed an executive order to that effect, but it's not all AR-15 ammunition. Apparently, the executive order is specifically for a type of AR-15 ammunition that has a lead slug with a steel tip to it. That's what got it classified as an armor-piercing round. But this does not affect AR-15 ammunition that we would use for target shooting and home defense. That is your basic, copper-jacketed slug. The ban is apparently only for the steel-tipped ones. I didn't even know that stuff was available. Well, I don't have an AR-15 anyway. I keep toying with the idea of getting one of those kits from Guns 80 and everything, but I already have enough hobbies. But it's not a ban on all .223 ammunition. It's just a ban on, they're called green tips because there's a little tiny green dot on the tip to identify the fact that there's a steel slug there.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's correct. It's not all. It is a significant portion because those are used quite a bit for target practice, not just for law enforcement or. But I was wondering.
Well, let me put a pause in here. First of all, I can't understand why anybody would use a steel-tip bullet for target practice. You want to use the cheapest ammunition you can, and I would be seriously concerned if law enforcement is actually using this kind of ammunition. That explains, in large part, a lot of the very unfortunate deaths we're seeing all over the country. Now, the .223 bullet is supposed to be in compliance with international treaties regarding wounding versus killing ammunition. But it really isn't, because the length to width of the .223 round means that when it hits its target, it tumbles badly and chews up a lot of tissue. Right. It actually carries it connects more of the kinetic energy to the target than expanding ammo like hollow points, which is illegal in war.
Right. Well, they're both extremely lethal.
Yes.
The next question I was going to ask, I just wondered if you had some idea of how much of this man-killer ammunition the federal government has purchased over the last couple of years. I had an article that was over a year old where the tally was up over 1.6 billion. That was more than a year ago.
Yeah, and now they're trying to ban bulletproof vests for civilians here, so we're easier to kill. But I don't know how far they're going to get with that, because the counterexample, again, is that horrible shootout at the Empire State Building where 9 bystanders were shot. Innocent people were shot by the New York Police Department. You give me a reason why those people should not be allowed to have body armor.
No, I'm thinking about buying some myself while I can still get it.
Mm-hmm. Now, you need to, if any of you are getting ready to buy body armor, the Kevlar type, you need to understand Kevlar has a lifespan. It doesn't stay fully potent. I actually don't know. I think it's like something like 3 to 5 years. You got to replace it. So some of the body armor, they've got the little pockets where you can put the chest trauma plates and stuff like that in there. But don't just buy it and put it away and take it out in 10 years and think it's going to work, because it won't.
Yeah, well, I'll have to study that. I wasn't aware of that problem.
Yeah. Okay?
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
All right, we're going to let you go here. Thank you very much for the phone call. Now then, another political scandal, one of many over at 12160. Former New Jersey Democratic chairman sold influence. Apparently involved a multi-billion-dollar mega mall project. It's being charged under the RICO laws. Speaking of politics and corruption, apparently at the time that she was targeting conservatives from inside the Internal Revenue Service, Lois Lerner received $129,000 in bonuses for breaking the law, is essentially what she did, being a political hatchetman for the White House. And by the way, the IRS, which has now dodged the fury over that, the 800,000 Obamacare tax forms that were in error, is now acknowledging they're so understaffed they're only going to be able to answer half of the taxpayer calls that they get. And they're getting a lot of calls because the tax laws have become so convoluted, especially with the addition of Obamacare. Even the professional tax preparers are having fits about trying to work all the way through it. Now, every 10, 20 years, we'll see a call for tax law simplification, and it never really happens because that complexity of tax law is where they hide the fact that special interests are getting breaks. The 1%ers, the churches, certain corporate interests. Every time some lobbyist goes up to Congress and says, oh, you've got to stimulate the business of my client, how do they do that? Well, they pass a new amendment to the tax code that cuts them some slack. And over the decades, it's resulted in a tax code that is gargantuan and virtually impossible to navigate, which is why professional tax preparation is a multi-billion-dollar business in this country. And because it has that much money, they lobby against tax simplification. They don't want anybody doing their own taxes, above the 1040 EZ form. It really is completely out of control. The tax industrial complex has become a power unto itself. Alrighty, now, over at the White House, they're apparently already celebrating over the fact that the Congress is now going to fund the DHS without making a stink about the illegal amnesty. They've decided they're going to change the name. We are not supposed to call the illegal aliens anymore. They are now termed Americans in waiting. Doesn't that make the problems go away? We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we are getting word that the people of Greece are, in fact, extraordinarily ticked off that the Syriza Party and Tsipras ran on a platform of anti-banker, anti-austerity policy, won on that promise, and then immediately caved into the European Commission to keep austerity going, and protests and riots are starting in Athens. Good for the people of Greece. You know what's really amazing here is how in our society, people who lie never get punished for it. Look at all the promises and lies that Obama made to get elected. Do you know that the American courts have actually ruled that lies by politicians are considered protected free speech? That's how weird it is. The people of any nation, Greece or the United States, need to give the politicians a reason to be truthful. Meaning, when we catch them lying, we walk into our public buildings, grab the liars, give them a good thick coat of tar and feathers, bounce them into the street, run them out of town on a rail. Because on the day that the people of Greece have the courage to do that, and it looks like that day is dawning, politicians will all of a sudden discover that truth is a virtue. And they will not discover that 1 second sooner. So, now then, getting on back to the news and the phone calls here. Getting on back to the immigration issue, which apparently Obama's now been given permission to go on with his very unconstitutional executive order, changing the laws from the desk of the Oval Office. And in order to try and sell his amnesty, Obama is having a town hall meeting. We're going to have another town hall meeting. Well, it turns out it's not really a town hall meeting. The Graham Center facility at FIU was rented by Telemundo and MSNBC for about $39,000. Tickets were never publicly available, but for some reason, a whole bunch of illegal immigrants have got tickets to attend to this. So this so-called Amnesty Town Hall is close to the town and is going to feature hand-picked illegals throwing softball questions at the president to make it look like this is the genuine public opinion of the American people. It's all theater. It's a theater presentation. All of government's a theater presentation to trick you out of your money and obedience here. Speaking of wasting money, story out of newsforge.com. Apparently, state legislatures across the country are spending more than $1 million a year on drug testing welfare recipients, and they're not finding enough drug abusers to justify the cost. It's just another handout to some government agency. Oh, I've got money. I get to go do drug testing on welfare recipients. It'll be great, and I'll make money. They're not actually accomplishing much of anything here. Getting back to immigration, David Cameron, when he took office, he campaigned on this no ifs, no buts promise he was going to cut immigration into Great Britain by tens of thousands. Now they're coming up on the May elections, and the new official figures are showing that not only did David Cameron not reduce immigration into the country, it has exploded. Just like immigration from Mexico into the United States of America. This is an agenda at work. And by the way, the population of Britain is growing so rapidly, they're starting to run out of farmland there. They're talking about Britain will have to import half of its food in less than a decade. From where? I wonder. Now, here in the United States of America, the Boston Marathon bombing is getting back in the news, and not just because the Department of Homeland Security wants to remind us all of why we need to give them our money in obedience, let them fondle our wives and daughters at the airport, drop and smash our laptops, steal our electronic toys from our luggage to keep us all safe from terrorists, which they have yet to actually find one in all these years. And apparently, one of the friends of Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, who was jailed for obstruction of justice for supposedly moving some of the possessions of Tsarnaev, may be released. The U.S. Supreme Court has issued a ruling that redefined the law prosecutors used to charge him, saying it was too vague and open to arbitrary interpretation. So he may be out, and I'm sure he'll have something very interesting to say here. Meanwhile, lawyers for Dzhokhar Tsarnaev have asked the judge to dismiss the indictment against their client, saying that the jury pool is hopelessly contaminated, and it's not diverse enough. There aren't enough minorities and younger people in the jury pool. And basically citing the constitutional right to have a jury that represents a fair cross-section of the community. Now, I'm sure the judge is going to deny this, because it is a bit of a reach, but it might help them build a case to have the case heard somewhere other than Boston, which I think would be a really, really good idea if, in fact, the government is interested in a fair trial, which we know they are not. We have been talking about the fact that at the same time the U.S. government is trying to take away assault weapons from the American people, the U.S. government has been spending your tax dollars to buy these very same assault weapons, and worse, fully automatic, to give to the Mexican drug cartels. And now, from some source yet to be determined, apparently these Mexican gangs are now using drones to bring their drugs across the border. And apparently this got sparked, okay, where down in Tijuana, one of these drones loaded with methamphetamine crashed in the parking lot of a supermarket. Because actually they overloaded it. Put too much drugs in there. Can't do a thing about the drugs coming into this country, but by golly, they're going to fondle and grope us when we're flying from one state to the other. Let's get on back about the corporate media. I'm talking about Brian Williams, talking about Bill O'Reilly, and people are piling onto Bill O'Reilly because he just has this knack for really annoying people. And the latest revelation has to do with his claim that he actually saw these 4 nuns get executed in El Salvador. And he was there and he saw the nuns actually get shot. Now, the case of the 4 nuns who were executed by the Salvadorans National Guard happened in December of 1980. And at that point, because of the public outcry, the executions stopped. Okay? Bill O'Reilly's own book says that he did not arrive in El Salvador until 1981. So why is he not going off into the sunset with Brian Williams? Well, oddly enough, there's a story over in Natural News about how now the apologists for the corporate media are saying it's okay when newscasters lie, that we've got to judge these people on a different standard. Which, I guess, the more money they're being paid, the more they're allowed, indeed even encouraged to lie. Because that's why they get those $1 million salaries. They're not paid that money to tell you the truth. They're paid to lie to you and get you to believe them. People who are telling you the truth, we're on a tight budget. So if any of you care to donate, you know where to go. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're going to go right to the phones here right now. We're going to talk to John in Chicago. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I'm suffering under global warming. It was -2 overnight.
Oh, my goodness. It's almost bikini weather, isn't it?
And they said we were going to get 2 inches of snow, and we actually got like 6. So,
gosh darn that human-caused global warming here. Apparently Jim Inhofe was tossing snowballs around inside Congress today to kind of make hope. Tell me about this human-caused global warming, how snow is a thing of the past and everything.
Exactly. I wanted to mention that net neutrality thing. I did send you that link. I made the RT video, but I saw that somebody got to it first, so you linked to the story earlier on your page. On the surface, it sounds like, hey, a company like Comcast, they want $150 a month, so they're all ticked off that people are paying $8 a month for Netflix. So I guess Netflix will go up to $60 a month or whatever the game is, right? And then Soros's companies will get, a cut of the action there. But, based on that whole thing where John Kerry needs more money because the U.S. is outspending Russia today 3-1, to do their propaganda thing and sell the war. I just hate to think that, they're going to tell Comcast now, or tell American companies not to broadcast RT anymore.
Well, again, we're still waiting to find out what's hidden in those 300 pages because establishing net neutrality is maybe 1 or 2 pages only, even with the very obfuscated way that they write these documents in Washington, D.C. And it seems like the issue of net neutrality was fanned up to try and get those of us who are on the independent media and the blogs to say, oh, no, we demand net neutrality. All right, here it is, but there's a goes-withness. And that goes-withness may turn out to be quite onerous indeed. I'm still waiting to get a copy of the FCC document myself so I can go through it.
Yeah, because I mentioned to you in an email before that I argue with a buddy of mine. All he does is listen to Neocon radio all day, and whenever he gets his top news stories from whatever right-wing sources, he says your boy is doing this, meaning Putin, or he says your boy's ISIS, and it's like, look, you don't understand. just because I disagree with the policies of this administration, and I point out to you that Obama's warmongering is just as bad as the neocons, you don't seem to understand. It doesn't mean that Putin is my boy or ISIS are my boys. The point is, or the Palestinians are my boy or Hezbollah. What you got to understand is that how did I put it?
Well, before you elucidate on that, I mean, this all goes back to George W. Bush, who was out there setting this whole polarized mindset of you're either totally supportive of what we're doing or you're the enemy and you're aligned with Al-Qaeda and you're aligned with this and you're aligned with that. And people who understand that their political position is open to criticism and doubt start getting very defensive about it, where their attitude becomes, look, if you don't agree with me, then obviously you're the bad guy and I don't have to listen to you because you're the bad guy and you have nothing constructive to say because you're on the side of ISIS and Al-Qaeda and the Palestinians and all those people who think that snow and ice is a reason to doubt global warming. And so it gets to be a very absolutist point of view, but it is actually an admission that they understand they cannot win the argument with the facts, the law, and the logic or the scientific data, and so it gets into this name-calling situation. If you don't agree with me, then you must be one of the terrorists. So that's their way of avoiding an actual debate on the merits.
Right, and they snuck that, remember? And they snuck that into the Star Wars 3 movie, remember? They stuck that absolutist mindset in there. You're either with us or you're with the terrorists. And
yeah, they did, and the other great quote in there was, "This is how democracy dies to thunderous applause." And I think the writers of that film, they were plugged into what was going on, and they tried to put some messages in there as much as they dared, without the Mockingbird people coming down and wrecking their careers.
Well, I think the scary thing is, and I know, I mean, you're surrounded mostly by your listeners. I know you get some hate mail or whatever, but on our side of it, you know that the people are waking up and they're not buying it anymore, and they turn on Fox News because they want to know what's going on, but they roll their eyes when Shepard Smith is way over the top saying Putin had shot down MH17, you know. But the problem is, what's really scary, Mike, is there's probably 100 million people in this country that are that stupid that if I say, hey, a civil war broke out in Ukraine, you know, John McCain, you might as well go finish off those Ukrainian retired old women with a .45 caliber bullet yourself, you idiot. Do you understand what you did to those people in Donbass? You jerk. You a civil war break out over there. You're responsible for it. Everybody knows you're responsible for it. And now if we go to bat for those poor old people over there, all of a sudden, I'm with Putin. What the hell is the matter with you?
It's how politicians sell these things. It's how politicians silence dissent. Even Mark Twain wrote about it in both The War Prayer and The Mysterious Stranger. He said, this is how it works. The warmongers go on out there. They accuse anybody who opposes them of being pacifist and weak. And drives them into silence, and it is a repeating pattern. And I actually would take issue with you that there are still 100 million people in the United States of America who are buying the government's propaganda. At this point, it is down to the military contractors, people whose paycheck come from the government, and even not all of them. Because I get emails from people who are on federal government contracts, and they're saying, you know, I don't want this to get out, but you're right and they're wrong. So, obviously the government and the media are going to come out there and say, oh, yes, the majority are listening to us, those bloggers, those tinfoil hat conspiracy people. They're a tiny, tiny minority, and nobody's paying attention to them. And you can almost see the sweat forming on their upper lips when they say that.
No, and I, like I said, I just mean the knee-jerk response. Like, you know, like I said, I've had it with the Judeo-Christian rhetoric. Like, three teenagers got kidnapped in the West Bank. You know, Netanyahu went and killed 2,100 Palestinians, and I go, what was that? I mean, you want to talk about overkill, and all of a sudden it's, I'm an anti-Semite, I'm whatever, and I'm like, it doesn't matter if they're a Democrat or a Republican, it doesn't matter. I get the same response. You support Hezbollah? And it's like, what, are you really that brain dead? I'm really sorry. Are you one of the guys that would sign one of Mark Dice's petition even though he doesn't even tell you what it is? I'm a little bit disappointed, but I know we're winning. And this net neutrality thing, I hate to think that if I capture an RT report for 4 minutes on my cell phone and put it on YouTube, it'll get shut down for copyright infringement.
Well, you know, only if RT complains, and they generally tend not to. It's like me in the videos that we make for WhatReallyHappened.com. I mean, all of the original content at the website is in the public domain. Feel free to copy it, repost it, especially All Wars Are Bankers' Wars. That's gone viral around the globe. And the problem is that YouTube will accept a claim of copyright without verifying it's coming from the actual copyright holder. And this is a dirty trick that's being used to shut down videos that the government doesn't want us to see. They'll just get one of their informants to write an email saying, oh, I am complaining about the copyright infringement of thus and such, and they're not even the copyright holder. They should not have the ability to go to YouTube. But YouTube goes along with this because YouTube is just as compromised as any of these other large internet service providers. And
I've only had one video banned from YouTube, and what I did is I took a clip from that movie Office Space. You've seen that, right?
Yes.
I took the clip where he was talking to Jennifer Aniston in the restaurant. He said, you know what? I don't think I'm going to go to work anymore. I don't think I'm going to pay my bills anymore. Do you like Kung Fu? And I just caught that on my TV on the Esquire network, and I put it on YouTube, and it was a minute, and it was just for a laugh. Fox News owns that movie. They complained to YouTube, and YouTube took it off. My other videos, if I have American music in there, they block the video in Germany. And they say, hey, you're using a Phil Collins song or something like that. They don't ban my video. They just warn me, and then they block it in Germany. Everything's blocked in Germany for some reason.
Well, it's blocked in Canada. I mean, more and more countries are trying to control what information their people have access to. And in the long run, it's not going to work. I mean, China's Great Wall of Silicon has got more holes in it than, well, the U.S. official story about anything. All right, well, listen, John, I got to let you go. Thank you for the call. I'm going to try and squeeze one more phone call in here before we hit the news break. Mo in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. How you doing?
Doing good.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're on the air. What's on your mind?
Michael, you know, I guess I just, I don't know. Sometimes I'm taken back a little bit. I've been following your show for about a year and a half. I love the program. Sometimes when you say I got to give Obama and Kerry credit, is that tongue in cheek? Is that like saying I got to give Hitler credit because he loves dogs? Or
no, I'm not joking. Okay, because I judge their actions one at a time. I'm not going to hate everything Obama does because I hate Obama. I'm evaluating what he does on a case-by-case basis, and I agree with him standing up to Israel, and I agree with him saying that all the world's Muslims are not responsible for the crimes of ISIS. We got to take a break for the news. I know we got another caller waiting on the line. Alex, I'm sorry, you're going to have to wait till after the news break, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 3. Phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, and we're going to go right to the phones here to Alex in New York. Alex, thank you very much for waiting through the news break. What is on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? Just two quick statements I want to make. I agree with pretty much everything that you're saying. I want to touch on the whole Netanyahu-Obama song and dance. First, I just want to comment about 3 years ago, getting onto the comment sections, I'd find an article on Drudge Report, this and that. And, a lot of people just didn't have a clue what was going on. 3 years later, up until now, I'd say people are kind of starting to get it. I see more and more comments, more and more people chiming in. There was an article just yesterday about, they want to audit the Fed, and everyone on that article, and there was like, I think thousands of comments. And I'd say just about almost everybody said either audit the Fed, abolish them. Some people said, kill everyone in the Fed, arrest them. People are starting to kind of wake up. They're getting it. And that goes the same with as far as, things like net neutrality. I think people primarily always hated Obama, but now instead of saying Obama, he's a communist and this and that, they're like, no, this guy's a straight fascist. Arrest him now. Where's the military? Why haven't they stepped in to arrest him? So I'm starting to see, the tone changing. At least through the comment sections. I don't bump into people on the street, and, they have that, that are quite awake. But, slowly but surely, every now and then I have a conversation with somebody and lo and behold, this person, maybe 1 out of 30 yeah, look what they're doing and this and that, they know completely what's going on. Now,
before you go any further here, when you are talking to people around town, because I do this all the time as sort of a cross-check for what the corporate media says the polls are showing, you have to basically initiate the fact that you are stepping outside the officially sanctioned bounds on polite conversation, either with a T-shirt or some other comment. I'll give you a good example. When I was at the bank the other day, and I was just taking a very long time to get something done, and I just said to the entire lobby there, I said, I apologize for the delay. We're trying to arrange a line of credit for Greece, and everybody laughed. Okay, so yeah, they need to understand that it's safe to talk to you about what they're really thinking, and then they'll open up.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I just, I needed to touch on that because, a lot of people are, I understand they're in despair. They're like, oh God, what can we do? No one seems to get it. But, I think, the American conscience is slowly but surely waking up. I hope it all collapses before anything, catastrophic happens.
Me too.
Globalists try to pull the one latch, full speed ahead. We're going to destroy all the planet, the entire planet. Who cares?
And then loan us back the money at interest to rebuild it.
Yeah, exactly. I just wanted to also talk about the whole, back and forth, Obama, Netanyahu. This is something that they've been kind of like trudging around for a couple of years. I think I honestly believe, and I hear what he's saying, Obama, I never liked the guy. I think he's a total puppet for the globalists. But, as far as he's getting a backbone suddenly, I mean, maybe you're right. I hope you are. We will see if he does anything as far as putting something, put the money where his mouth is. But I just don't see it. I see it more as a kind of a dog and pony show, a tap dance that he wants to, purport like he's this ambiguous Muslim and his whole past is this like nefarious, secretive. No one can quite pin his past or anything. And Fox News seems to carry that whole story like he's this ambiguous Muslim and he's not even a Muslim, this guy. He's bombing Muslims, left and right in the Middle East. I mean, come on. I try to tell this to people all the time. He's not a Muslim. He doesn't care about Muslims. He drone strikes Muslims on the regular.
Yeah, the fact that he went to a madrasa as a kid is rather irrelevant. I mean, I was raised Congregationalist, and obviously I'm not today. So that's grasping at straws here. And it could just be that Obama is standing up to Netanyahu just to remind him who's supposed to be the top dog in Washington, D.C. It could be a very personal, private ego motive. But setting that aside, I'm glad to see somebody actually standing up to Netanyahu and saying, look, you're not really in charge here. No matter how much you subvert our government, but you're not the ruler here yet. And again, my animosity about Obama or Kerry or anybody aside, I tend to judge their actions as individual cases. There's a lot of things Obama has done I do not agree with, but when he does something that I do agree with, I'm going to make a point about saying, yeah, okay, attaboy on this one.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Mike. Hey, listen, you're pretty much our vital everything right now, so just keep it up, man. Love what you're doing.
Long as I can. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Getting on back to the media, okay, apparently, and this is over in Zero Hedge, the Obama administration is starting to embed, quote, government researchers, end quote, to monitor the corporate media organizations. And this is something the FCC is on board with. They're calling it the Critical Information Needs Study, which are going to put all these government researchers into all the media organizations around the nation to make sure they're doing their job properly. This is real. Now, in the Soviet Union, they had the same system. They were called Zampolit, a political officer, whose job it was, wherever they were, media, industry, even embedded with the military, to make sure that everybody conformed to the government's stated position on everything. Now, we know that CNN has had military intelligence officers staffed there undercover. Now they want to make it official. Every corporate media organization is going to have a government researcher to make sure they're doing their job properly. In other words, if you dare question the official story, you will be out of a job instantly. They're literally trying to terrorize the corporate media to continue lying on behalf of the U.S. government here. Now, as one of our callers mentioned, John Kerry is out there saying that the U.S. government has to provide more money for the American media to counter Russia today. The reality is the U.S. is already spending 3 times what Russia is, and they're still losing the propaganda war. And those gosh darn Russians, They're cheating. They're telling the truth. And that gives them an unfair advantage over the United States of America. So Kerry wants more money to have English language broadcasts into Russia, which I'm sure the Russians already have access to all the English language over the Internet, because I have a lot of people inside Russia who read my website and listen to my radio show and send me information. Now, the foreign press is starting to really take note of this revealed torture dungeon up in Chicago. This is a domestic police black site. If you are sent there, there is no record. Your lawyers can't locate you. Your family can't locate you. You are officially not on the list of detainees, and people are being tortured there. This is in Chicago, under Mayor Rahm Emanuel. And it basically underscores the fact that our government has completely gone off the constitutional reservation. And all those people who years ago, when it was Abu Ghraib, was saying, yeah, torture them, they got nuclear weapons, we got to... And I warned you, when you cross that line into saying torture is okay, it will come back to the United States, and it is here right now. Looking at a story in the antimedia.org, where people are saying this is the National Defense Authorization Act at work, legalizing these kinds of tactics against law-abiding American citizens. And maybe some of them are guilty of a crime, but they too are protected by the Bill of Rights. So, we have a New York financial regulator, Ben Loskis, head of the New York Department of Financial Services, saying there's an Armageddon cyber attack coming on the banks. The virtual 9/11 is about to happen, and they'll blame Iran and Russia and the rest of it. We'll be back with more information about NSA spying and computers and all the rest of it after these words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And as I was starting to talk about before the commercial break, Ben Losky, who's head of the New York Department of Financial Services, is sounding the warning of an impending Armageddon cyber attack on the banking system. And even he used the term, a cyber 9/11, which we were using here. We called it a virtual 9/11, a cyber 9/11. And remember, the U.S. government and financial system would actually benefit from such an attack, because then they get to duck the blame for the financial crash we all know is coming. Because if the economy crashes and they can't find somebody to blame it on, then we, the American people, are going to stand up and point our fingers at Wall Street corruption, at Washington, D.C. corruption, mismanagement, and say, you guys wrecked the place. The reason the United States of America is no longer the greatest nation on earth is the United States Congress, the White House, and Wall Street. Not necessarily in that order. But if they crash the system, then they can say, oh, it wasn't us. We're not to blame. It was an evil attack by those Iranian, Russian, Chinese, whoever. We've been warning about that for quite some time. And I'm glad that he's using Cyber 9/11, because we all know that the original 9/11 was a false flag attack. Blow up the World Trade Towers. Say, oh, the Afghanistan did it. Oh, no, they didn't do it. Iraq did it. Oh, well, they didn't do it. Oh, Saudi Arabia did it. We're going to attack them next. Now, we've been talking about this break-in at the world's largest SIM card manufacturer. Now, the SIM card is the little tiny chip that goes into your smart device that identifies it to the cell phone network. And it includes security features, such as your encryption keys. And at first, this company came out, Gemalto, saying, oh, no, everything's secure, you can trust our SIM cards. And now they finally have to confirm that, yes, as a matter of fact, somebody did break into their computers, and it was a very sophisticated hack attack. They're not talking about some kid with a little script generator in his parents' base room. They're talking nation-state resources out there. Another little story, this is from CBC. Everybody is now getting more and more concerned about the revelation that the NSA has put hardware backdoors into products that you buy for your computer. Routers, the BIOS, or its Macintosh equivalent, and now the actual hard drive. So they've got a hardware channel to come in over the internet, bypass the operating system, bypass any application level security that you've put on there, and go right to looking at your drive. And former NSA operatives interviewed by Reuters have confirmed Kaspersky's analysis, saying, yeah, the NSA's been doing it, and they have been doing it for years. And they're not doing it for your safety and security. They're doing it to spy on you, to make sure that you're not thinking those double plus ungood thoughts. And they're not making you safer and secure, because every one of these back doors the NSA puts into our computer systems is there to be found and exploited by the cyber criminals. But the NSA doesn't care if you lose your banking information or something. You should have bought the hacker protection insurance package, of course. Now, when Edward Snowden first blew the whistle on all of this, American computer companies, service providers, hardware providers, software vendors noticed an immediate drop in international sales. And with the advent of this hard drive story, we're already seeing the numbers come in, and they're negative. Other nations are simply not buying the major U.S. tech brands, especially for any government office. China is not touching any U.S. brands. They don't need to. They manufacture the stuff. They can go to their own factories and say, we want to order 1,000 of these hard drives without the NSA code in there. So at a time when our economy is just struggling to survive, the NSA has crippled our computer IT industry. And for what? They've never actually caught a terrorist. They can't even catch the cyber criminals. They've made all of our computer systems wide open to attack with all these back doors. And we proved with our NSA code challenges a year ago, real criminals and real terrorists will be able to secure their communications against the NSA. So the NSA is just about watching you, the American people, stealing your business secrets, copying off pictures of your significant other in states of undress to drool over, like free unending porn. Your Aunt Mary's top secret chocolate chip cookie recipe that you want to start a business with, and just use it for their own profitability. And they have been caught doing this before. Okay. Now then, it's time for human-caused global warming. I should have a fanfare for this. Niagara Falls is frozen. No, not the waterfall. That's been frozen. This is the city's water mains are now frozen solid. And the pipes are breaking. Now, when you set up a city water system, you pay attention to something that's in the ground called the frost line. This is the lowest point in the soil, which is a very good insulator, by the way, below which freezing will not reach. And you always take your pipes and you run them deep into the ground under the frost line so that during the winter they're protected by the soil from freezing. Well, apparently this winter has driven the frost line down below where the pipes are. And that is significant cold. Absolutely. There's going to be a lot of repair work going to need to be done. By the way, if you are living in one of these areas where this cold is still persisting, on all of your little faucets outside the home, if you don't have them wrapped with insulators, just turn on the faucet a little tiny bit to get a little drip going. Now, it's not going to keep the pipes from freezing, but what it will do is give the ice and water someplace to go, because ice is very unusual in that when it goes from its liquid to its solid form, it actually expands. That's why ice floats on the top of your soda drink. That's why icebergs float on the top of the ocean instead of sinking to the bottom. And in a contained space, when water turns to ice, it will expand and rupture the space. So you just want just a little tiny drip of water, which is going to create a huge icicle underneath. But as long as you keep that drip going, your pipes may freeze, but they'll still be intact when the spring thaw happens. Alrighty, near record low possible Thursday night in Ann Arbor. February on track for coldest on record in Tri-Cities. More record-breaking cold on tap before it turns warmer. And it goes on and on. More about global warming and some desperate and pathetic propaganda there too after we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about human-caused global warming. Some more of the headlines that we're looking at. Maine cold weather records falling as fast as temperatures themselves. It's really insane. Now, the counter propaganda is already out there. The CBC in Canada ran a story saying record snow and cold created by human-caused global warming. And their entire theory is that the Arctic polar caps are melting because of human-caused global warming. And all that cold air is coming down from the Arctic and freezing us solid. Well, there's a logical flaw there. If it's warm in the Arctic, warm enough to melt all the snow and ice up there, why is the air coming down below freezing? Doesn't really make a lot of sense. And we know the Arctic ice cap is actually much thicker. Here's another one. This is from no less than the Washington Post. Even as the eastern U.S. freezes, there's less cold air in winter than ever before. That's the actual headline. And first of all, we're getting freezing out in Denver, Boulder, out west as well. Unusually cold, record cold out there as well. But it's what the Washington Post is out there trying to say is, yeah, it's very cold, but it's just a little itty-bitty, teensy-weensy cold. It's only a very tiny area and should not cause you to ever doubt the most holy revealed dogma of human-caused global warming as revealed by the First Church of St. Al of the Gore. How far the Washington Post has fallen since the days of Watergate. Now remember, back in 2000, the corporate media was proclaiming that because of human-caused global warming, there would be no more snow and ice. Just last November, the corporate media was saying that this winter would not see any more cold temperature records because of human-caused global warming. And here we are on the doorstep of March, with centuries-old cold records falling like flies. And they're still trying to push the global warming agenda. Has the Washington Post no shame? Are they on drugs? Do they all own stock in carbon trading firms? Or do they, just like so many of their other brethren in the corporate media, lack the courage and integrity to admit that they may have been wrong? That they may have been suckered in by Al Gore and his con artists. Another story, this is over at MSN. Scientists now know why global warming has slowed down, and it's not good news for us. And this is trying to bring back the hiatus or the pause, where they're saying global warming is real. It's just on hold right now. It's not on hold. It's gone the other way. And now they're putting it up there, we may be cold for a few decades, but the global warming will come back unless we tax carbon right now. They're still pushing that agenda. And fine, let them go on making complete fools of themselves in this era where Brian Williams and O'Reilly are just making utter fools of themselves. Because they're melting their own credibility with all this talk about global warming, but don't worry, it'll refreeze once the outdoor air hits it. And here's one, this is from Time magazine. Undersea volcanoes may be impacting climate change. Yeah, everything impacts climate change to some extent or another. And they're talking about a new study claims volcanic eruptions on the ocean floor may impact Earth's climate cycle, and that predictive models, including those that analyze humanity's impact on climate change, may need to be modified. Okay, snap quiz. How many active volcanoes and thermal vents are there on the floors of the world's oceans? This is for the Time magazine people only. The rest of you, hands down. Okay, Time? Again, how many active volcanoes and thermal vents are there on the floors of the world's oceans? Don't know? Don't feel bad. It's a trick question. Nobody knows how many active volcanoes and thermal vents there are on the floor of the world's oceans. And if they don't know that, then any models are just expensive, computerized, wild rear-end guessing on which national policy, meaning a carbon tax, should not be based. They're looking for a reason to keep clinging to human-caused global warming in the middle of yet another record-setting winter. And, it's the fault of those undersea volcanoes, and we will have to adjust our models until they explain the cold and ice in terms of continuing global warming. They're still pushing that agenda. They're still pushing that agenda. Talk about shameless in the corporate media, which is why we call them prostitutes and correspondents, because that's what their job is. That's what they're paid to do, is lie to you. You can get the truth for free all over the Internet. That's why they're trying to shut it down. Now, moving on to education, there was a very interesting video over at Blacklisted News regarding Florida parents who went to a school meeting as required by law to review the curriculum their kids were going to be taught. And they had some serious issues. They were looking at the 7th grade textbook Civics in Practice, and it has a lot of misstatements. It includes the statement, the Constitution can be changed in 2 ways, formally by amendment and informally by the government. This is repeated in the 8th grade textbook United States History, which includes the President issues executive orders. These commands have the power of law. These are both completely wrong. They are not supported by the Constitution. They're propagandizing our kids to accept a tyrannical central president. And the school board couldn't respond to this criticism, and instead just wagged their finger and said, you're just being narrow-minded, racist Bible thumpers. No, we're being Americans. We're being constitutionalists. We are holding the government to the terms of the contract with America, which is that the government is the legal, legitimate government only when it is 100% in compliance with that Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And apparently over in the European Union, they're having a similar situation because a leading British historian, Professor David Abulafia of Cambridge University, is looking at the new textbooks for their classrooms and says it's clearly biased to sell the idea of Britain integrating with the European Union. Our schools are not centers of education any longer. They're centers of indoctrination. And yes, they were when I was going to school too. I remember very clearly one of my social studies textbooks, Our American Heritage. And I remember it had this painting of a steamboat on it, on the cover. And all these cartoons in there about how evil the Soviet Union was and how superior our system was. But the difference is now we know it, and parents are getting very upset. And they have a right to be upset. Schools should teach our children the facts. Science, engineering, math, history. It should not be there indoctrinating them with beliefs that are convenient to the money junkies. And yet that's entirely what they do. Well, if they're going to do that, let the money junkies pay for the schools and stop having us pay taxes to brainwash our own children. Going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here, and I'm looking at my emails, and I'm being somewhat chastised regarding my comments over Obama's executive order banning the .223 ammunition. And the reason my response to that was tepid was because there were too many people who are out there trying to portray this as banning all .223 ammunition for the AR-15. And the ban is only specifically for the steel-tipped ammunition here. And this listener wrote in to remind me that the United States Supreme Court has ruled in United States versus Miller that the Second Amendment reserves to the American people the same arms carried by the government forces themselves. So if police have steel-tipped ammunition, we are entitled to it. And this listener is absolutely correct. In larger context, of course, Obama's executive order is unconstitutional. both because he's not allowed to write laws from his desk and because it is an infringement of that which should not be infringed. And apparently Obama is starting to respond to the resistance he's getting from Congress over his executive orders. And apparently he's literally out there saying, go ahead and pass a bill saying my executive orders are unconstitutional. I'll just veto it. So he's getting a little too big for his britches over there. Now, last week we reported on this story coming out of Canada, where the education minister had authorized schools to strip search students for a variety of causes. The case that brought it to the news was a young girl who was accused of selling drugs. They searched her effects, didn't find anything. They ordered her to strip search. Now, normally, this would be something that you would turn over to the police, but the school did it themselves, triggered a tremendous backlash, as it should have. Your job is to teach our children, not dominate them and get your jollies off of them. And apparently, the Quebec education minister, Yves Bolduc, has now stepped down. And he's calling it a personal decision. He's going to go back into practicing medicine. Apparently, he's a doctor where he gets to see all the naked people he wants to there, and nobody complains about it. And by the way, as a footnote, this 15-year-old girl who was strip searched, they did not, in fact, find any drugs on her at all. If I were lucky enough to have had children, they would be in private schools. I don't care what other sacrifices I would have to make. I would not allow my children to be in a public school anywhere with this kind of behavior. Looking at an article at Blacklisted News that really lays it all out. Forced blood draws, DNA collection, biometric scans, mandatory vaccines. What country is this? We are being treated like we're farm livestock, not like human beings deserving of respect from our so-called elected representatives. Oregon State Senator Elizabeth Hayward is out there saying government should physically grab children by force and pump in all the vaccines that big pharmaceuticals think they ought to have. And these vaccines are causing harm. There's a new documentary coming out, I think it's called Minuscule Amount or something along that line. I got the trailer to it, linked to the front page of whatreallyhappened.com. And we're trying to get somebody from the film production as a guest on the show right now. But I mean, when you look at what's in vaccines, there's still mercury-based preservatives in there. The corporate media says, no, that's all been phased out. Read the box insert. They've got peanut oil in there to provoke a reaction. That's where the peanut anaphylaxis epidemic's coming from. Mercury is in there. That's where the autism epidemic is coming from. Aluminum is in there. Formaldehyde, which is a known carcinogen, and for some reason, monosodium glutamate. The CDC admits this. Oh, don't worry. I mean, these are things you don't want to eat, but we're just going to pump them right into your blood veins there. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Story out of the Daily Sheeple. They are now warning that we're going to have an extended flu season as H1N1 is staging a comeback in the wake of this massive vaccination campaign. The more they vaccinate, the more flu seems to be showing up. Now, there was a very interesting story not too long ago. The U.S. Navy mandates vaccinations for all of its crews on board ships. And the CDC last year published a report detailing about an incident that happened on the USS Ardent. This was a U.S. Navy minesweeper out of San Diego. Was out at sea conducting training, and this fully vaccinated crew came down with the flu. I mean, major part of the crew put out of action. And the CDC has acknowledged this actually happens a lot. The vaccines are causing more illness. Had that story came out of Canada a couple of weeks back where people who've gotten the flu vaccine are more likely to come down with the flu. That's not what they tell us it's for. Oh, one shot of this flu vaccine and you will not get the flu at all. And people are coming down with it. During the mumps outbreak, I think it was 2009, 90% of the people who came down with mumps had the vaccine. Same thing with the measles vaccine. It's all driven by the money. They don't care about your health. They could care less. If you get sick from the shot, we'll sell you another medication. Oh, it's a shame your kid came down autistic after getting 5 vaccines in one day. If we can't frame the parents for shaken baby syndrome on that one, well, that's okay. We'll just sell you more medications to try and prop the kid up. It's all dominated by the money. Your health and safety are not a concern because our current orthodox medical industrial complex would collapse overnight if the American people were actually healthy. They need you to be chronically sick. They need you to be getting toxic medications, toxic chemicals in your food, things that make you feel out of sorts. Oh, we've got a new product for that. Just take this pill. It'll counteract the last pill that we gave you, that counteracted the pill that we gave you before, that we counteracted the pill before that. And it just goes on and on and on. And the government looks the other way because anything that generates money in tax revenues and heavy campaign donations, that's good. We don't question anybody that writes big campaign checks here. Getting into the world of GMOs, another article out of Natural News, we are continuing to see over and over and over again how these so-called GMO buffer zones do not work. When you get GMO seeds, there's a little warning in there about cross-pollination, and they advise you to keep it's a 10-yard open area around your crop. Now, to a farmer, 10 yards surrounding their entire field, that's a lot of useful ground that they're having to give up. And it doesn't work. Remember the wheat contamination scandal? Wheat farmers up in Oregon discovered their wheat had been contaminated by a non-approved experimental GMO wheat grown several states away. Have they not heard of birds, bees, wind? And they're finding out now that the farmers using these crops, they're having to use even more insecticides they did before. The pests, the weeds, are developing resistance to the GMO-produced toxins. They're hardier than they were before. They call them super weeds. But they have a solution for this. Okay? Members of Parliament are saying that GMO and GM food should be banned. We'll come up with a new name about it. They're going to solve the problem. Ouch. They're going to solve the problem of GMO food resistance by not telling you you're eating GMO food. That's their solution. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here and get some animation work done. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, stay skeptical. Go ahead and get angry. Share what you know with who you know. Please support Genesis Communication and WhatReallyHappened.com. We need your help. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.